Welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Bargman. A few years ago, I wrote and performed a solo show called The Edge of Every Day, which was an exploration of the rough edges and contradictions we all face and grapple with. The show hit a nerve, and the relevance of the topic would only grow over time more than I could have foreseen. So, here we are. Real talk with real people, sharing stories and perspectives that spark provocative invitations to leap out of what's safe, on the edge of every day. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everyone. We are live in the Hive, and I'm so excited to have you join me for the debut of my podcast, The Edge of Every Day. Some of you watching or listening in know me, but some of you may not. You may be tuning in because you're a fan of TalkRadio.NYC, or you may be intrigued by the title of this podcast, or you may be a fan of our guest. In any case, I just wanted to take a moment during this first episode to introduce and share a little bit about myself, since it's the first podcast, set the tone for what you can expect each week. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and I now live in both NYC and the Catskill Mountains, and that's where I'm tuning in from now. I have two great love relationships, my husband and my kitty. And I love to do two things. Well, I love to do more than two things, but for the sake of this podcast, I love to do two things. And these two things that I love to do are to tell stories and to listen deeply. Literally, those two things are my job. Those two things that I love show up in all of my career choices. I'm what they now call a multi-hyphenate. Yeah, I know that was a new word for me too. Trust me, now that you've heard it, you're going to see it everywhere. Multi-hyphenate. It's just a fancy word that means I have more than one career happening at the same time. But truthfully, many of us do. So the first one is I'm a lifelong professional actor, singer, songwriter, voiceover artist. The second one, I am a seminary-trained, ordained interfaith, interspiritual minister, a counselor, and wedding ceremonialist. And third, I'm a presentation leadership coach. So recently I was having a wonderful conversation with a girlfriend of mine, talented Broadway actress, and she's also a presentation coach. And we were talking, and she, out of the blue, calls me a walking Venn diagram. I love that. It's perfect. It's a perfect metaphor because indeed, I do walk the edges of these three communities, and it's where they connect, where they overlap. In the center of these three, you will find storytelling, deep listening, and my number one, my passion, my mission, know thyself. Yes, the ancient Greek Delphic maxim, know thyself, is at the heart of every artistic and creative journey. It's at the heart of every spiritual journey, and it is at the heart of every leadership journey. Know thyself is at the core. It's the core theme of my solo show, The Edge of Every Day. And it's the core theme of this podcast. And it's because it's not always easy to know thyself. It takes courage to get real about who we are, both individually and collectively, to get real about, to even notice that, even recognize that we have edges, that we balance them, that we transform them, that we learn from them. Exploring our edges is about as real as it gets. So it's through these weekly conversations with friends and colleagues from all three of my communities that we'll lean in and we'll explore our rough edges and we'll explore what that even means. So thanks for listening in. And without further ado, it's time for me to introduce my glorious guest. I'm so excited. Heather Roan Robbins is a ceremonialist, a counselor, and a world-renowned astrologer for over 40 years. She is the author of Moon Wisdom, Everyday Palmistry, and several children's books. She writes the weekly column Starcodes for We Moon Calendar, and she is the creator of the hot off the presses Starcodes Astro-Oracle deck. We'll hear all about that and more. Welcome, Heather.
Hello, Sandra. Thank you for bringing me along on your first show.
Oh, it's so great, so great, so great to have you. Thank you so much for supporting me, being my guinea pig on my first one. Before we get started, I want to share with our listeners how you and I met, because I think, again, for my first podcast, it's really relevant. And it's a heartwarming story. And everyone will understand why I share it at the end. So back in 2005, after grappling with a lot of rough edges that I won't get into at the time, I decided I wanted to step out of the proverbial spiritual closet and enroll in an interfaith seminary program, which there were two of them at that time in New York City. And I made an appointment to attend an open house at the first one, the New Seminary for Interfaith Studies. I attended, and there were about 10 of us, 10 other people who were looking to find out more information and to see if they wanted to enroll. And Heather was also in attendance as a new graduate of the program, and she also spoke about her experience. And it was her soul-stirring story, her practical wisdom and insight, and her understanding of how interfaith ministry fit into her personal journey that hooked me and resonated so deeply. Oh, Heather.
That was wonderful.
And
then
so
we
true.
met for tea and talked for about 3 hours about just that subject. You know, how to take your spiritual search and be of service with it and deepen it and encourage other people in their questions. And
totally.
What we loved about this path is it's non-directive. It's not about telling people what to think or feel, but helping them explore how spirit speaks to them.
Absolutely. And literally, Heather, it was on that moment. It was after listening to you that, you know, when we had that talk, I was already in, but it was on that moment that I decided I would look no further, that I was going to enroll in the new seminary as soon as possible. And in fact, I think it was you that did that interview as well. And that I asked you to be my mentor and champion through my seminary journey, which of course you did. And that seminary journey changed my life. And it was in seminary where the idea for my company was born. You know, if I'm not a part of any organized religion, I may love this journey and I may love studying them, but where am I going to go for an expansive experience? And clearly was the theater, and Sacred Stages was created. And it was under the umbrella that Sacred Stages that I produced my solo show, The Edge of Every Day, and the concepts that were put forth in that show propelled the desire to have this podcast and share these conversations. And so, Heather, here we are. You hold a very dear space in my journey. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. It's always such an honor to walk with people in their journeys.
Amen, amen. It is indeed. So let's dive in. I've heard you say that astrology was a childhood passion, which is mind-blowing. That's mind-blowing. You know, the other kids are out, you know, playing kickball, and your passion is astrology. So tell us, what was your family life like?
So bizarre.
And how did you discover this?
Well, before I discovered astrology, I was fascinated by mythology, and I collected fairy tales and mythos from all around the world.
Yeah.
And around 11, I began to put these pieces together, and I did my first astrological calendar, breaking up the months into astrological sun signs, and then started noticing where everybody came from. Now, the family joke, as I've mentioned, is that my father was an abstract mathematician. My mother was a psychiatric nurse. You put them in a blender, you get an astrologer. They didn't believe me on that. But it was, they both use intuition in their own way. My father was so intuitive, and that he would sort of put his mind out into, he said the only practical form for his mathematics was in black holes where time runs on skew lines. He was a topological dynamics, and he really couldn't put a light bulb in. He really never learned how to drive. He was very good at what he did. And my mother, who was extremely eclectic, was a psychiatric nurse and an occupational therapist, and really an artist, and was wildly intuitive and wouldn't admit it. But we had
interesting.
frustrating moments all the time. So we're like, let's go down this way. I go, anyway, long stories about how she wouldn't admit why she was overloading sometimes and what was going on, and how her intuition worked. She didn't have much control over it because she didn't admit it was there.
Right.
Most people, when they're starting to study how to use their intuition, learning how to close it down and open it up to notice what is theirs, what is their story about their intuition. Was my mother would get a hit, and then she would develop this fear-based story around that hit, rather than stick to
what was real and true,
and didn't know how to parse that apart. And that's one of the trickier parts of developing your intuition, but it's an essential part. So I had that on one side, my father's mathematics on the other side, my study of mythology. And I went to my first year in high school, I was working, volunteering with the telephone operator back in the day when they had a switchboard at the school.
Oh my goodness, I love it.
And the woman who ran she was not only the switchboard operator, but basically the receptionist for the school, was the niece of a famous astrologer. Her father, her uncle, was the astrologer for the early stages for the Reagans and for other Hollywood types. So she was a better counselor, much as she didn't agree with her uncle's politics. She was a better counselor with her charts in front of her than the school psychologist was. Without the chart, she was a nice person. With the chart, she was really helpful to people, all these young kids. And I was with her one day when she said, "Oh, I'm a little worried about the transits at the moment." I go, "Oh," she said, "Yeah, they're a little dangerous." And I saw her stop 2 teachers in the hallway and go like, "Hi, could you be a little careful this weekend?" I said, "Sure." One was an elderly man, the drama teacher, who died of a heart attack on stage that weekend. And the other one was a younger man who fell down and broke an arm. And I said, "Tell me all you know, come on." And so I pumped her for information for the rest of the year. That was 14. I went home with several major astrological books, including an ephemeris, which is where you look up all the planets, and started watching everybody I met and going, "Oh, when was your birthday?" And then looking at the planets and then watching them to see how they exemplified what I saw in the charts. That was 15. And then I went on from there. So I started early. I took it on. I started doing charts professionally in my early 20s. Before that, I had done human resource work, and which gives you a chance to know every chart in the business, and did that on and off in those early years, using my astrology without necessarily owning it. And then I began to came out of the star closet.
Interesting. It's so fascinating to me, and this is in alignment with one of the questions I want to ask you later on, that your mother did not own her power, and that there was a passing on of a skill that you could bring forward and live out for the lineage. That gets into, I want to talk with you about your astrological work with the lineages of people. And we're going to take a short break, and we'll come back to that when we come back after our break.
Wonderful.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy. and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you interested in having a better relationship with yourself, others, and God? Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. George Andow, for the show, A Journey Through into Awareness. On my show, we journey into the awareness that the mind of God is the true seat of our personal consciousness. We join together each Monday at 7 p.m., so tune in on Talk Radio NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we're back. So I'll need you to unmute. Oh, you got it. So the lineage, your work with, you worked in a family counseling establishment, and you worked through lineage issues. Expand on that for us, please.
Oh, that was fascinating.
Oh.
I was the staff astrologer for a group of family therapists in southern New England for about 9-10 years, and they oversaw my work. And they.
What does that mean?
I had my own business practice, but with their clients, they would supervise my work, give me feedback, and bring me in when we had specific issues to work through. So I had their feedback educating me on the psychology and the layers. And they had the charts of people going back 2, 3, 4 generations. So we could see repeating family patterns. And we could see, I specialize also in families that deal with adoption and with, misassigned parentage. You see someone who isn't the same repeating pattern, but they're the missing piece in a family.
Interesting.
So my brother was adopted in. I had a brother that was adopted out 10 years before I was born. My mates was adopted by an aunt and an uncle. So we've had close-up versions of this to watch how it happens. And for instance, my father is almost all water signs. I'm heavy on earth with some fire. My mother is air, and more air. And my brother is all fire. So he's sort of the missing, and one of his planets touches each point, each of our charts exactly. And I see this often in adopted families or fostered families, or the kids that come in, or the kids that are trying to figure out where they belong in the family. And it's a gift to watch as the repeated patterns, the same issues will come up. You can see, this person is dealing with the karmic lineage of that grandfather and that uncle and that back, and how can they take that issue and live it well? Each planet, each sign, each aspect has a positive aspect, a practical aspect, and a real challenge. And it's always up to free will and grace, which part of it. You're never trapped, you're never stuck. But if you can understand the pattern, you can choose to live out a more positive aspect. An example that's pretty clear is alcoholism and addictions.
Mm.
On Neptune's positive side is spirituality, group experience, intuition, imagination. Practical Neptune is water, liquid, oils, things that flow and don't have boundaries. Negative Neptune is illusion, delusion, escapism, addiction, drowning, poisoning. Often you'll find a family that's got a very strong spiritual lineage, and that gets interrupted where they feel, they're so hurt by events, or they're so traumatized, or there's a break in their ability to reach in, or they're disillusioned by the old church and they haven't found a new one. And that craving for spirit gets so intense that they go into spirits, and there's a need for alcohol or escapism in some form.
Absolutely.
And if you can use group experience, the idea with group experience, with AA, for instance, is you're sitting in a room soaking up the psychic environment of people who think they can do this and turn their life around. And so you use your intuition to absorb that, and you use spirituality, whatever form you choose, to help you direct that and to feel like you're a part of something. Yeah. And that's a positive use of Neptune versus the negative use. But you can see that pattern that runs in the family.
Yeah. I have a song called They Don't Call It Spirits for Nothing that talks about that very thing, that, I poke fun at it, but the undercurrent is all about how we use spirits to have some sort of spiritual relationship with the world at large and the universe, the cosmos. Wow, that's fascinating. So you touched on also something that, and also that work, the edge, the balancing of the light and the dark. That is the definition of the edge of every day. That indeed. So one of the things that I love about you is that your practical, straightforward, and grounded insight that you share. And it's a real approach. It's an antidote to this propensity that I find in the spiritual world. And I know that I've mentioned this to you in the past, this propensity to only focus on, and this is as a result of what you said about focusing on both the light and the dark, is that in this preciousness in the spiritual community that is all about the light, and this willful positivity, and as Jeff Brown calls it, this toxic positivity,
the toxic bypassing.
Yeah, that the unwillingness, the resistance to seeing some of the darker, more shadowy aspects of who we are, the parts of ourselves that we are ashamed of, or the lineage is ashamed of, that does not want to deal with.
Yeah, and that, I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico for quite a while, and I loved it dearly before I came to New York, just in time for 9/11. But in that time, we used to say, why did the Santa Fean cross the road? And the answer was because they were channeling the chicken. That the idea that you could.
They were down with these guns.
Channeling the chicken. That there was the lavender people were a bit much. That I was considered a very grounded person there, which is funny for an astrologer, and I still. But it was that I could see both sides of that. What happens if you really grounded in your environment, because New Mexico offered mountains and earth and realness, but it also created situations where whole groups of the populace were in that lavender world and not dealing with the grit, and that they're both sides of the same coin, and
really
we cannot separate that out.
Do you find that in your sessions, your astrological sessions, that comes up a lot? Do you find with your clients that there's a resistance to, they want to just hear about the good stuff, and there's a bit of resistance to some of what we might call the shadowy aspects of?
They don't tend to work with me.
I can see that.
People come to me when they've got a problem.
They're ready to get real.
Not always, but they're saying something hurts or something is uncertain, or I'm trying to understand this relationship and there's grit in it. Yeah. Help me understand that grit so that we can live it another way.
Yeah.
And not saying anything is bad, but how can it be transformed?
Right.
And what I do see is what really gets me in spiritual practice, and we know this as ministers, is when someone says, "Oh, that's why you have cancer. You have bad thoughts."
Oh, dear Lord.
And what I see is they use this to distance themselves from their own anxiety around it, and they're trying to create, instead of, I have no idea why. The honesty is, we have no idea. This is not why. We're not talking causality. But we can say, how can we use this experience for you to understand, to know yourself?
Yes,
How
to
can you
know
use
thyself and grow and transform.
Right.
This
We're
experience.
not talking cause. We don't know how many lifetimes, what's going on in the universe, what's happened, but we can talk about how to use this moment and this experience, not why it happened, but how can we use it? And I'd see that key piece is how are you using spiritual?
Yes, and this goes very hand in hand with a question I have. And I love that you call yourself choice-based astrologer, because and I'm sure it has a lot to do with perceptions about astrology and how to dispel them. And so, can you elaborate? You're basically saying that right now. You're elaborating beautifully that choice-based being. We have all of these that you lay out the choices.
We always have choice how we use. We say that you can't tell the difference between a surgeon and a murderer's chart. It's how they choose to use that ability to cut. If you look at Albert Schweitzer's chart, he has one of the most difficult charts, but he was difficult. He used his difficulty in refusing to let people die of leprosy in Africa. After he had challenged the Nazis and made Germany too hot for himself, he went and dealt with lepers, and it took on a real positive challenge.
Positive, yeah.
Right. So it's, again, how can you redirect that same energy and serve it well? There's an expression that I heard many years ago that fits in astrology, that your genius is found in your bad habits. And your bad habits are found in your genius.
Perfect.
And I think of my old part pit bull who had jaws that could chew through anything, that saved the family from bad guys twice. But she also ate shoes, cut through seat belts. That was her genius and her bad habit. How many singers choked? How many,
lost their voices? Yes, indeed.
We have to watch those places that are our nexus of gift. And astrology can help you map that, and what's the positive use of the very things that are getting you in trouble. If someone is bossy and tells everybody in their family what to do until no one can stand them, they have great executive ability. Put them someplace where that is needed, and they can make the trains run on time. It's like how do you find a positive use for that? And you have people own the fact that this is a gift of theirs, and they have to use it carefully.
And have to use it wisely and channel it into proper tracks and proper avenues. Well, you touched on something that I want to get into. We've got to go to a break, but I want to next touch on to how you came to New York City and what quite literally exploded in your world when you arrived.
Okay.
When we come back.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on TalkRadio.NYC every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you a cannabis enthusiast, a cannabis professional, or interested in entering the cannabis space? I'm Johnny Tsunami, and this is Planet Baco Lolo, a less taboo view. On our show, we will discuss the cannabis world through the perspective of various cannabis professionals. Tune in every Thursday evening, Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Talk Radio NYC, Planet Paco Lolo, a less taboo view.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.NYC. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc, now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we're back. So, yes, let's get into that. How did you come to New York City? What was that? What brought you? And what exploded on the scene? And what happened as a result?
I was living in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, where I had come to take care of a friend, found she was dying, and stayed for 12 years. It was wonderful, beautiful, powerful place to live. But it is a little bubble in the world.
Bubblish, yeah.
Beautiful, but it's a bubble. And
Yeah.
I started having dreams that I had met a wonderful partner and we were getting closer and thinking of getting married. And I started having dreams where the phone would ring and I would pick it up. It'd be in the middle of another dream. And the phone would ring and I'd go, yes. And I'd hear this deep female voice saying, I'm sending you back to the front lines.
I'm sending you back to the front lines.
Exactly. And it happened like over and over again, like once every month or so, for about 6 months. We married. 3 days after the wedding, Ren was offered a job in New York City.
Right.
We got there August of 2001. 3 weeks before 9/11. I had gone back to New York, back to New Mexico to help close up shop after we had moved here. And boom, the whole world exploded and I could smell burning bodies for 6 months.
Oh, yes.
As we all could in New York. And you got real, suddenly who cared about astrology for the moment? And people, they were dealing with edges. I was in the middle of Pluto transits. I was not that surprised. I thought, okay, I'm going back to New York. That's the front lines. Well, nothing compared to New York after an explosion. One of my oldest clients who had been in New York, who had worked with for 10 years and was living there, was an EMT and a French translator. And she was down at ground zero working as an EMT and she'd had a wild experience 10 years before that I had known her through, where she had been walking in New York and seen bodies and ashes falling from the sky, had been so traumatized by that she had to do, PTSD training for, an EMDR and all that for years. So when bodies were falling out of the sky, she was down there right away because she was ready for it. She saw those bodies falling out of the sky. She saw that.
She had gone through the experience.
And she could use all of her training to help everybody else who was dealing with the trauma of that. She was down there for the next 3 months. Yes. And she was translating for the French dog search and rescue team that had come in. And so, as well as taking care of people down there. She was part of, they got one person alive out of the mess after it fell in. And she was the EMT, one of the two people stabilizing that person while they got them out. So every night, only thing I could do to help was to give her a place to tell her story. So every night she would call me and tell me about the body parts she found, or what was going on, or what had happened. And it gave me, a chance to serve at a time when, but you need more tools for that. Yeah. And that's when I went to an interview with the new seminary, and I heard Rabbi Roger describe working down in the pit with his little chaplain hat on, and that, a lot of the first responders had training on how to handle trauma, but the construction workers that were operating the forklifts, the big cranes down there had not. Yeah. And one day he was just down in the pit, and he see the lunch horn honked, and a guy gets out of the crane and just bursts into crying. So he comes over and hands him Kleenex and nods, and he sees the chaplain, and he talks to him, and he tells him what he saw, and he tells him what was going on. And Rabbi just kept handing him handkerchiefs and nodding, doesn't say a word, kept talking, and the guy kept talking, and finally the horn rang, and he said, "I have to get back to work," and Rabbi nodded. And a week later, he saw the guy at the church that we're using as a staging center, and the guy said, "Rabbi, what you said last week helped me so much." And he hadn't said a word. But he had held space.
Precious space.
He held it with his heart. And I wanted to know that. I wanted to explore that, and to deepen that, and to add that to my toolbox. As I'm an astrologer, I work with tarot, I work with palmistry. I've had ways in and all these, but there was that piece of really opening my heart and listening and creating that space that I got from seminary.
Beautiful. Now, did you do any chaplain study afterwards?
I did not. I have always thought that might be something
in my future
lifetime.
too. Yeah.
And it is, but I work as under spiritual counseling. I hear a lot of people and walk through them, and I have walked several people and been acted as a death doula through several endings of people and their families' endings. So I feel that work is so powerful.
Indeed. Oh my Lord. And I had my first experience. I was baptized by fire with my mother dying during my first year of seminary, and her asking me to be the minister at her funeral, and she and I planning that together, and then showing up to do that in person. And
so powerful.
And I remember how glorious you were with me during that time. And because it was baptism by fire.
Well, what I often found is people would say, "Oh, I had to take some time out." I said, "You didn't take time out. When you say I'm signing up to be of service to spirit,
period, right,
then all of a sudden hell may break loose all around you."
Yes, indeed.
And that's part of your training.
Mm-hmm.
I said, only part of it comes in the actual program. The rest of it is you say, "I'm going to show up," and spirit says, "Good, I need you here." Right.
Yeah.
And that and we also have to know when we can't do it, and we need to bring in the extra troops along with us. So it is, but I find that everybody has a story who is in any form of spiritual training, not just our seminary. But when they say, "I'm going to do this, I offer to show up," then life trains them.
Yeah, truly. So how does your spiritual counseling, your interfaith understandings, and your spiritual counseling complement your astrological readings, your palmistry, all of that. How is that cohesively put together?
Oh, they're all
give us an idea.
like all of my divinatory tools, and I'm always inventing new ones, like I just did.
Of course.
They're just different ways of getting in, and I see them as scaffolding out of my own issues, so that I can look into somebody else's with a heart, without getting caught in my own story, or getting less caught in my own story. We always have to watch that, but to kind of really sit with their story. So I don't, some people just sit down and they read every possible detail in somebody's chart, and I find that most people don't hear it. So I ask them, what is it that you are here for? And I take that as the entrance point into the rest of the chart. And I make sure that it's a dialogue rather than just me monologuing, so that I can really sit. Some people need a monologue, but they just won't say anything. But most people need a cauldron, need a place to do the work together in, and to look at their life and their issues from the perspective with that scaffolding of the chart, with the archetypes of the chart working through.
Gorgeous.
Which is what we do. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I have said that all the work that I do, and I'm sure you can relate deeply to this. This is just another way of saying what you just said. It's all the same work. It's only packaged differently.
It is. It's being present.
Period.
And each one has the other piece, we're talking about choice-based astrology before, that I think that by looking at all the different ways a person can live out their chart, it helps them make better choices. It can give them a map to work with. It won't get them out of the jungle, but it gives them a map and gives them, some guidance.
Some direction.
Right. And another piece I work with, I mentioned, is palmistry, which is a little harder to do over Zoom, but I have people send me snapshots of their hands. And I've written a book, Everyday Palmistry, which you can get online or Kindle, for people that work not with palmistry, but they work with people. They're ministers or massage therapists or lawyers, and their hands, they can use the hands to kind of understand the people they work with at the next level down. But hands they always show a movable future. The hand that you are, that you write with shows more change than the other hand. But it tends to be, this is what, the passive hand is what you come in with. The active hand is what you're doing with it and what you can do with it. Yeah. So you'll see changes in lines if you watch your hand over time. I've seen lines get diffuse and fuzzy when someone starts drinking too heavily, or if they're not taking care of their health, you see the change. I've seen lifelines grow 1.5 inches when people made a decision. I've seen big changes in people's hands in response to the decisions they make and the habits they change in their life, that show that, when we've got that direction, we build, it's like conduits
momentum
in our life. Yeah.
Truly.
And that's been really fascinating to watch and work with.
So, and the name of the palmistry book again?
Is Everyday Palmistry by
Excellent.
Books.
Okay, so we are in need of a break, and for our last round, I really want to get into Starcodes and your brand new Astro Tarot deck, glorious Astro Tarot deck, and that is newly out. And when we come back, that's what we'll dive into.
Wonderful.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.NYC, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.NYC.
Uninformed about menopause and how it impacts on your life?
Hi, I'm Pat Duckworth, women's health strategist and host of the Hot Women Rock radio show, empowering women leaders at menopause. Join me every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. UK time on TalkRadio.NYC for interviews with inspirational women who will share their top tips to rock your world.
Have you ever thought of reinventing yourself? Are you looking to create a new life's journey? Hi, I'm Kevin Barbaro, host of Coffee Talk XL every Tuesday night live, 8 p.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.NYC. Tune in live to hear me and my guests from a variety of different backgrounds. As a former college coach and a current full-time actor and owner of multiple companies, my show is as eclectic as my life. That's Coffee Talk XL every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. on TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we're back. So I'm going to start this last round with a Krishnamurti quote. One is never afraid of the unknown. One is afraid of the known coming to an end. So that's our ultimate edge, the fear of change, this understanding that we're not that, thanks to COVID and thanks to our political landscape. We're not that anymore, but we're not yet that. So we're in this liminal space of not knowing. And as you know, we all, those of you listening in, we are not comfy. We are little control freaks. We're not comfy with not knowing. And so
that's very true.
So I want to talk to you about your new deck. I want to talk to you about Starcodes. How can we use these gorgeous tools after you tell us all about them to explore these edges in our political and life landscapes?
I do an article on medium.com and wemoon.com and on my Facebook page called Starcodes, which I've been doing for 30 years, talking not about the astrology of your sign, but what's the astrological weather for the week ahead, and how can you best use it? How can you roll with what's happening? And then I get to look back at the end of the week and see what happened and correct myself, which has been really fascinating for 30 years.
Oh, I'm so sure.
And so recently I thought it's not really a tarot deck as much as an oracle deck, which means you pull 1 to 3 cards and read them. And I worked with a wonderful, for instance, this is Capricorn, and this is Pisces, and this is the 10th house, which is the first card I pulled for you, which talks about the profession and where you're going and the time that we're climbing. And as you read in my little book, which talks about the gift, the challenge, and the practical aspect of each of these planets, each of these signs, there's 56 cards. And it's all the aspects, the astrological, whether the sun is active or quiet, all of these different pieces. You, just by using the deck and the book, you learn the astrological terms, which you could then apply back to your natal chart if you ever want to learn astrology. Or you can just pick a card. What I found is often very helpful when you're at a crossroads is to pick 1 or 2 cards for path A, and then 1 or 2 cards for path B. And which one feels like, which one do I want to step towards? Now, we talked about that on not the end of knowing. We're at an unusual time, and all of us astrologers looked at 2020 going, "Ay, what's going to happen then?" And we thought invasion, but it was an invasion. It was just microbial. Saturn opposed Pluto originally, it happens, there are 2 cycles. Saturn takes almost 30 years to go around the zodiac. Pluto takes 240 years to go around the zodiac. So they catch up to each other every so often. They opposed each other right on America's ascendant and descendant when 9/11 happened. And we saw this breakdown. Pluto is, death and rebirth. Saturn is structure. They conjunct for the first time in Capricorn, in Saturn's own sign, just as COVID was starting to happen, and for the first time since Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church back, and that's a breakdown of old structures. And so we broke down Saturn when Pluto conjunct with Jupiter. And when Pluto and Jupiter's lots of, Pluto is death and rebirth, when they conjunct the 3 times that year within this Pluto-Saturn conjunction, those were the 3 peaks of the death toll here in America. Now they're still cooking, and they're still challenging us to finish up and change this work. Saturn squared Uranus, which is change in business. So we've been this year 3 times it's happened, and the last pass is between now and Christmas, where I said just use a pencil in your calendar because you don't know what's going to happen. Keep that eraser ready because everything keeps changing. The clutch is in. We are in metamorphosis, and as much metamorphosis as a caterpillar is becoming a butterfly. We don't know where we're going, but we've had the opportunity. We can use it as an opportunity to make this work better. Saturn conjunct Pluto in Capricorn brought out the dictators around the world. It's asking us what is the best use and what is the worst use of power. That's electrical power, political power, personal power. What in the face? Pluto always says, in the face of life and death, why are you here? And he wants you to have a good answer. So that Pluto, it's not a rhetorical question. It's not telling you. It's just like to have a reason to be alive. And that aspect, which was so intense for the last couple of years, you can feel it on the people that it got a little too close to. I had COVID just as the COVID began. I was in New York. They shut down, and it helped me kind of get back on track. What matters? Stick to what matters to you. So we see this in America's just with the globe is just coming out of these series of upheavals, starting right after the new year, and it began to kind of feel a rebirth of the new forms and the new structures. Now, as Pluto goes through a sign, it brings whatever that is focused on to the edge of life and death. And we saw it go through Scorpio as we had savings and loan and AIDS epidemic, transforming how we handle other people's resources, their body, their money. Pluto went into Sagittarius, and we saw a transformation of politics, of spirituality. We saw it's with all the fight, the religious wars started to really heat up there for a while. But we also saw at the beginning of Pluto in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is about speaking the truth and seeing the world as a bigger place. It's about the natural world and our philosophical edge. So at the beginning of Pluto in Sagittarius, no one believed in climate change. At the end of it, almost everybody believed. Pluto then went into Capricorn just at the beginning of the Obama era, as the sun got very quiet, so everything sort of slowed down. But it was about let's look at how we use power. That's how we handle political power, and we have revolutions to make. And it kind of started to take off, and then the sun got quieter than it has for centuries. And it's just starting to get active again. We're starting to see sunspots, and the sun acts like the volume control. It doesn't. It just when the sun is active, politics is active. People are looking for new answers. When the sun gets very quiet, it's a very artistically rich time, but it's hard to get political change moving. So that got a little quiet there for a while, even though there was so much promise and beginning at the beginning of that era. So now we see some new changes coming up. It started to get active, and then we got active in very difficult ways last winter as Pluto conjunct Saturn exactly during, January 6th and other exciting moments in our country's politics. America is going through its Pluto return. Pluto is coming back to where it was when the American Revolution happened. It was exact right before it's about where it was during the Boston Tea Party. And the kind of, again, what's the right use of political power here in America?
Yeah.
And it's asking us to come back to our vision statement.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of interesting, all those layers. So my
Fantastic.
hope with this is that you get to use the cards, which you can get anywhere, Amazon. They just came out through Hive.
Excellent.
Without having to know astrology, you can get some of the benefits of the symbolism and the archetypes and use them and say, what medicine do I need now? I need a little extra sixth house about sustainability, or I need, a little extra south node and finish working through my past, and to kind of use it to help us understand what we need, what medicine we need.
Excellent.
What will help us.
So we can find that deck at Amazon and anywhere else.
Bookshop.com, Barnes and Nobles, a couple of other places.
Fantastic.
So, and hopefully at your favorite bookstore.
Indeed. Better. And folks, you can find Heather at also and Starcodes and Heart Codes at Roan, ROAN Robbins, ROBBINS.com, all one word, HeatherRoanRobbins.com.
Or you could just Google Starcodes and you'll find me eventually.
Excellent. Well, we are at the end of our time together, Heather. And I can't thank you enough for joining me for this birthing podcast. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your sacred space and your friend.
Your good questions.
And your good friendship. And on that, we're going to close out with this edge quote. I want to stand as close to the edge as I can without going over. On the edge, you see all kinds of things you can't see from the center. Kurt Vonnegut. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Till next time, take good care. Bye.